The gray sky stretched over Manhattan, its reflection shimmering across the towering glass buildings. Nestia Collins pulled her coat tighter against the cold drizzle as she stepped into the headquarters of Vanguard Consulting, one of the most prestigious financial advisory firms in the U.S. She never cared for Wall Street's lavish lifestyle, nor did she dream of glamorous cocktail parties. She preferred numbers, financial models, and the satisfaction of crafting the perfect investment strategy. But this morning, her work was interrupted by a sudden message. "Come to Meditech's office. Urgent." Just 4 words, no explanation, no greeting. But Nestia didn't need to guess who had sent it. Lagan Carter, CEO of Meditech Innovations, the cutting-edge AI-driven healthcare company. Lagan was a man of few words. If he said urgent, it meant something serious. 30 minutes later, Nestia stood outside Meditech's headquarters on the 42nd floor. The atmosphere inside was tense. Around a sleek glass conference table, shareholders and the PR team whispered urgently among themselves. At the head of the room stood Lagan Carter, his sharp gaze sweeping over the room like a commander assessing a battlefield. Across from him stood a striking woman with golden blonde hair and a piercing stare, Olivia Grant, a renowned surgeon and, more importantly, his ex-girlfriend. "I'm done, Lagan," Olivia said, her voice like a blade slicing through the air. "I told the press already. Don't expect me to come back and save your damn project." Silence fell over the room. Lagan clenched his fists, though his face remained impassive. A middle-aged man in a navy suit cleared his throat. "Lagan, do you realize how serious this is? Meditech's stock dropped 15% this morning after that article. If we don't get ahead of this, the $50 million deal with Blackstone is going to collapse." "I know," Lagan replied, his voice low and controlled. He turned to the PR team. "Do you have a plan?" A young woman nervously flipped through her notes. "We were thinking of issuing a press statement, clarifying that this is just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Lagan interrupted, his tone sharp. "Olivia just publicly tweeted that I'm a workaholic who dumped her for AI. No one's going to buy that." Nestia instinctively took a step back. This wasn't her problem. She was a financial analyst, not a crisis manager. But then Lagan's gaze landed on her. "Collins." His voice softened slightly. "Come here." She hesitated, but with the weight of his piercing stare on her, she had no choice. She stepped forward. Lagan's blue eyes swept across the room once more before he spoke, his voice measured and deliberate. "We need a new story, something strong enough to overshadow this scandal." He paused for a second, then said, "And I think I just found the solution." His eyes locked onto Nestia's. "I need you to pretend to be my fiancée." The room went dead silent. Nestia let out a short laugh, but it quickly died when she realized no one else was laughing. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "Very serious," Lagan confirmed. "The media will forget Olivia if I show up with someone new, someone stable, reliable, not a celebrity like her. The shareholders will feel reassured and Blackstone won't pull out." Nestia shook her head. "I'm not an actress. I don't know how to fake something like this." "You don't need to act," Lagan said calmly. "Just stand by my side, smile, and let me handle the rest." She took a step back. "No. I don't want to be involved in this mess." Lagan's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped into something dangerously persuasive. "I'll fund your dream," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "The financial consulting firm you've always wanted to start? I'll invest $500,000. No strings attached. Just help me get through this." Nestia froze. $500,000. That was exactly the amount she needed to start her own company, a way out of her corporate job, a chance to build something of her own. But the cost was a lie big enough to consume her whole. She swallowed hard. I need time to think." "There is no time." Lagan's voice was firm. "The press conference is tonight. I need an answer now." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Every pair of eyes was on her. Nestia felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. She looked at Lagan, the man she had admired from a distance for his talent and vision. And then she saw something in his eyes, not just arrogance or desperation, but a fragile glimmer of hope. "Okay," she whispered, barely believing herself. "I'll do it." Lagan nodded. He didn't smile, but his shoulders relaxed slightly. "Good," he said. "We have 4 hours." Nestia wasn't sure how she had ended up in this situation. 1 hour ago, she had been analyzing financial reports at Vanguard Consulting. Now, she was in the backseat of a limousine, cruising through the busy streets of Manhattan, with Lagan Carter sitting beside her. He didn't say much. Occasionally, he checked his phone, sending messages to his PR team. Nestia's chest tightened. This was a mistake. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. Lagan glanced at her, his tone as steady as if everything had been planned out long ago. "The Waldorf Astoria. The press conference starts in 2 hours." 2 hours. 2 hours to become his fiancée. Nestia clenched her hands over her lap. She had never imagined herself playing a role in a fabricated media stunt. But $500,000? That was the amount she needed to launch her own financial consulting firm, a way out of corporate life, a chance to build something for herself. This was her way out, here. Lagan handed her a small black box. She raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "A ring." His voice was devoid of emotion. "You'll need to wear it in front of the press." Nestia hesitated, then slowly opened the box. Inside, a diamond ring sparkled under the dim car light. Too perfect, too extravagant, too fake. "You really think it's that simple?" she muttered. Lagan met her gaze unfazed. "I don't think, Nestia. I do what's necessary to protect my company." For a moment, she just stared at him. Lagan Carter, the man known for his cold, calculated decisions, was now asking for her help in the only way he knew how. Without another word, she slipped the ring onto her finger. 2 hours later, they walked into the grand conference room of the Waldorf Astoria. Camera flashes exploded around them. Dozens of reporters from the New York Times, Bloomberg, Forbes filled the room, eyes burning with curiosity. Nestia took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Lagan, on the other hand, looked completely unfazed. He walked onto the stage with effortless confidence, placing a firm hand on the small of her back, not as an affectionate gesture, but to steady her. "Ladies and gentlemen," his deep voice resonated through the microphone, "I know there have been a lot of rumors about my personal life today. I want to set the record straight." Silence filled the room. All eyes were locked on him. "Olivia and I parted ways amicably, and I deeply respect her contributions to Meditech. But today, I want to introduce the real woman in my life." He turned slightly, looking at Nestia. "Nestia Collins, my fiancée." A murmur spread through the crowd. Camera shutters clicked wildly. Nestia's skin burned under the spotlight as Lagan pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her waist with such natural ease that even she almost believed it. She forced a smile, the perfect smile for the press. But when Lagan declared that they would be married within a month, her heart pounded. This wasn't just a game anymore. It had begun. 2 weeks had passed since the press conference, and Nestia Collins' life had completely changed. By day, she was still working as a financial analyst at Vanguard Consulting, buried in spreadsheets and investment reports. But by night, she had to step into a different role, Lagan Carter's fiancée. She had moved into his Fifth Avenue penthouse, a space that was as sleek and emotionless as the man who owned it. Everything was perfectly arranged, no clutter, no warmth, just cold efficiency. Lagan wasn't just expecting her to wear a ring in public. He expected her to attend investor meetings, charm stakeholders, and play the perfect partner. Tonight, that meant attending a medical fundraising gala alongside him. Under the dazzling chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel, Nestia walked into the ballroom beside Lagan, his hand resting lightly on her back as they greeted investors and executives. "Try to smile," Lagan murmured under his breath. "You look like you're being held hostage." "Because I am." She forced a polite smile as they approached a group of potential investors. "So, Miss Collins, you work at Vanguard Consulting, correct?" an older gentleman asked, his sharp eyes scanning her. "How did you and Lagan meet?" Nestia parted her lips to speak, but Lagan beat her to it. "At a medical technology summit," he said smoothly, flashing that perfectly calculated smile. She asked a question so sharp, I couldn't ignore her. A complete fabrication. Nestia sipped her wine, holding back the urge to roll her eyes. Everything was going according to plan until Olivia Grant arrived. She walked in like she owned the room, her white dress hugging her frame elegantly, golden hair swept into a sleek updo. She exuded confidence, the kind that made it impossible to look away. "Apologies for being late," Olivia said, pouring herself a glass of wine as she approached them. Her gaze flickered to Nestia before settling on Lagan. "Lagan invited me as Meditech's medical consultant. Of course, I couldn't refuse." Nestia's grip on her wineglass tightened. She felt Lagan's hand press slightly firmer against her back, a silent signal, or maybe a form of control. But what unsettled her more was the way he looked at Olivia. Not cold, not indifferent. Something was still there, and that realization stung more than it should have. The ride back to Lagan's penthouse was silent, but the tension was suffocating. As soon as they stepped inside, Nestia kicked off her heels and turned to face him. "Why was she there?" she asked, arms crossed. Lagan loosened his tie, unfazed. "I invited her. Olivia is one of the top surgeons in the country. Meditech needs her." "Right," Nestia let out a dry laugh. "So that look you gave her, that was just business?" Lagan met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "I don't have time to dwell on meaningless things." His words struck a nerve. "Of course you don't," Nestia exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "You always put work above everything else. Have you ever thought about who you are outside of Meditech? Or are you just a machine designed to generate profit?" Lagan didn't answer immediately. For the briefest moment, his eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite read, a crack in the armor. But then, just like always, he shut it down. "You wanted $500,000, Nestia." His voice was calm, almost too calm. "This is the price." It felt like a slap. She took a step back, inhaling sharply. "You know what, Lagan? I get it now. You're not afraid of losing Olivia. You're just afraid of losing Meditech." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked toward her bedroom, slamming the door shut behind her. And in the silence that followed, Nestia realized something terrifying. She had let herself get too deep into this game. 3 days after the gala, Nestia Collins threw herself into work, trying to ignore the unease clawing at her chest. She kept telling herself, this was just a contract, a business arrangement with an expiration date. And yet, no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the image of the way Lagan had looked at Olivia that night. That evening, when she returned to the penthouse, Lagan wasn't there. He was always busy, but this was the first time he hadn't even sent a message about coming home late. Just as she was debating whether to call him, her phone lit up with a message from his assistant. "Lagan is still at the office. He's not doing well." A strange worry tightened in her chest. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and hailed a taxi to Meditech Innovations. The office was eerily quiet when she arrived. Rows of empty desks stretched into the dimly lit space, the only glow coming from a meeting room at the far end of the hall. She quickened her pace. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, Lagan Carter was slumped over the conference table, papers scattered around him, his face pale, his breathing shallow. Nestia rushed to his side. "Lagan?" She grabbed his shoulder, shaking him gently. No response. A weak cough escaped his lips before his eyes barely fluttered open. "Nestia?" His voice was hoarse. His fingers brushed against her wrist, a fleeting touch, so faint that she almost missed it. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she whispered, pressing a hand to his forehead. Burning hot. Without hesitation, she called for an ambulance. Lagan was diagnosed with severe exhaustion from overwork and sleep deprivation. Sitting beside his hospital bed, Nestia watched him, the man who always seemed untouchable, now looking more fragile than she had ever seen him. And for the first time, she saw Lagan Carter not as a ruthless CEO, but as a man desperately carrying the weight of his entire company on his shoulders. She thought back to the moment when, in his fevered delirium, He had mumbled, "I can't let Meditech fail. I promised my mother." And suddenly everything clicked into place. She had always assumed that Lagan only cared about his company out of ambition, but it wasn't just that. He was doing all of this for something deeper. "Lagan," she murmured, reaching out and gently taking his hand in hers. He wasn't just a contract anymore. He was a person she genuinely cared about. And that realization terrified her more than anything else. 3 days later, Lagan Carter was discharged from the hospital. Nestia had expected things to return to normal, to go back to work, to restore the boundary between them, but nothing felt the same anymore. When Lagan stepped outside the hospital, instead of rushing straight back to business, he paused, and for the first time he looked at her. Really looked at her. "Take a walk with me." Nestia blinked, caught off guard, but nodded. They walked through Central Park, neither speaking at first. The tension that usually hung between them had faded. Lagan, for once, didn't seem like a man drowning in responsibilities. Finally, he broke the silence. "When I started Meditech, I just wanted to prove myself to the world. But the further I went, the more I realized I was doing it for something else." He exhaled. "My mother died of cancer because it wasn't diagnosed in time. I swore I wouldn't let that happen to anyone else." Nestia felt her heart tighten. For the first time, Lagan was letting her see the man behind the CEO. And what scared her most was that she wanted to stay. She wanted to know more. "I have a dream too," she admitted softly. "I want to start my own financial consulting firm. I want to help startups like Meditech survive and grow." Lagan turned to her, surprise flickering in his eyes. "You never told me that." "Because you never asked." She smiled faintly. Lagan stopped walking. Then, without hesitation, he took her hand. "You're not like Olivia," he said, voice steady. "You're more real." Nestia's heart pounded. She didn't pull away. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything." Lagan's gaze locked onto hers. "Just stay." And in that moment, Nestia realized the truth. She had fallen for him. A week later, Lagan asked her to meet him at Bryant Park. When she arrived, he was waiting under a towering oak tree, dressed in a crisp white shirt and trousers, holding a small velvet box. Nestia's breath caught. "Lagan?" He smiled. Not the cold, practiced smile she had once known, but something real. "Take a walk with me," he said. They sat down on a stone bench. Lagan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "When I asked you to pretend to be my fiancée," he began, voice low, "I was only thinking about Meditech, but I never expected you to become the most important person in my life." He opened the box. Inside, a sapphire ring glowed in the afternoon light. Sapphire, her favorite color. He had remembered. "This time, it's not a contract. It's not for the company or for anyone else." He looked straight into her eyes. "Nestia Collins, will you marry me? For real?" Tears spilled down Nestia's cheeks before she could stop them. She had once thought this fake engagement was just a game, but now it was the most real thing in her life. "Yes," she whispered. "I will." Lagan let out a quiet laugh, then slipped the ring onto her finger. And as he pulled her into a deep kiss beneath the golden autumn sky, she knew. This was love.